very nice introduction. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're most welcome, Jeanette. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We're definitely honored to have you on with us today. So basically, just to quickly running through. So you're going to be talking about health is the new currency, how a self-care mindset unlocks physical, emotional, and mental well-being so that we can harness our human advantage. Could you tell us a little bit more about it, please?
I surely can. I think it's important that we learn how to change that relationship that we have with ourselves, because that is really where health comes from. And the idea that we believe that we have to know more, have more information about how to take better care of ourselves is probably a little misplaced, because essentially it's knowing ourselves more. It's having that self-knowledge of what our bodies really need and changing that relationship with our very own bodies so that we are seeing that as our most important tool every day. That essentially is how we build health from the inside out. And I think that's a big shift in how we think about getting healthy. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Fabulous. Sounds exciting, and can't wait for us to move along with all the stuff that you have prepared for us. So
yes.
Can we start with what do you think is the most important right now as our physical and mental health is being challenged on a global level? I mean, we don't need to go into details what's going on right now, but we are facing significant issues out there. But what do you think is most important right now with our physical and mental health in our current situation?
Yeah, I want to share my screen for a moment and just show something that I think we can all relate to, because that is probably what it comes down to as we are looking at. So welcome, first and for all. I'm so excited to be sharing this with you today. But this is really where I want to start, right? Because we're all in this place where we are burning out. We're burning out emotionally. We're burning out physically. We are burning out mentally. And the stress isn't, especially with a global pandemic like we're facing now, the stress isn't going away. And so this idea that we have to shift our relationship with what's happening rather than being able to control what's happening is probably an essential part of our changing relationship with health and well-being. And I think as we're going through what we're going through right now as a crisis, what we have neglected to see is that we've had a health crisis for a long time. We've had a health crisis of stress for a long time. And the stress, given that this conference is about immunity, probably one of the things that's tasking and draining our immunity and our well-being the most is the stress we're living under. Because our immunity is our immune system is very connected to stress in our bodies on different levels. And especially what I found through so many years of working with people is that the emotional and mental stress that happens when we are not taking care of ourselves is one thing, but also what's really coming out through this crisis and this global crisis that we're in right now is that we're seeing how our emotional, mental health is really essential right now, because we can do all the right things that we need to do to protect ourselves from health and from a disease. But when it's about stress, we can't protect ourselves from that unless we change our relationship with how we engage and interact with that. Because stress isn't going to change. Stress in our life isn't going to go away. Quite the opposite. The future isn't slowing down. We have to slow down. And so I think that's one of the big shifts that we're seeing today. And so one of the things I want to point out is that this self-relationship that we have is very much related to how our mind works. And so I want to see, is the chat available? Is the chat link available? So feel free to put in a thumbs up or just a exclamation mark or a yes or a Y if you catch yourself sort of having this mind chatter churning that you're realizing actually is causing stress in your life. And I wanted to ask you to just for a moment recognize what it sometimes feels like when you get stuck in this cycle of stress that's really sort of taking hold of you, building up in your body. And see if you can really notice sometimes when you are lost in thoughts. Can you remember or sort of tune back into what happens in that moment in your body? Your body is cramping up, your body is getting tight, this feeling that we're not in control, right? And that's a lot of times what stress is about, is this feeling that we're not in control. And that's what I think we need to shift as we're waking up to the importance of health and well-being in our society right now. What we can change is how we take care of ourselves. What we can change is how we take care of ourselves. And I want to see if there's any questions that are popping up about this, because I would like to go a little further into how this shift and change can happen, because we're talking about behavior today. And I wanted to really dig into what it is that can help us change our behaviors around self-care. But I want to see if there was any questions coming up first, or any comments. I saw something in the Q&A, but it might have been something else. Edward, what do you think?
Yes, Jeanette, I have another question for you, actually. And this one is connected with healthy habits. A question on my mind, actually. Why do you think self-care is so difficult for us? And why does it seem so hard for people to stay with healthy habits?
I'm glad you're asking that, because that is exactly what this slide is about, right? It's about how we get stuck in a story. We get really, really stuck in a story. So think about this. When you have a craving for something and you're telling yourself you should do something, but you kind of end up doing something else. So we tend to think that that's willpower. Right? We tend to think, oh, I just don't have enough willpower. But what's actually happening underneath it all is that the stories that we tell ourselves, either about who we are, what we are capable of doing, or the stories that we are longing to connect with again. It could be a family meal. It could be something that we grew up with, an environment we're in, that all of a sudden we're longing to be back there. Maybe we're traveling and we long to be back home with our families. And so we want to do something that reminds us of home. Or we do. So it's very, very hard to stay on a target with something. That's one of the reasons why I wrote my book about how to really shift that relationship with how we take care of ourselves through eating, because it's the one thing we do several times a day. And very often we share meals with other people. And so that is the one thing where we first can practice really investigating that self-relationship that we have. So one of the things we have to shift, in order to shift our habits around self-care, we need to create more self-awareness. We need to come into a relationship of self-respect, where we really honor what our bodies need. And that is how we can then change that cycle of self-care. And the more we practice self-care, the more we become mindful, the more we create more honor and respect for ourselves. And for that matter, too, it relates to how we engage with other people. So I wanted to go to the next slide, because our habits are emotionally driven. Eventually, what we're trying to do is say, no, I'm in charge of my emotions. We're not in charge of our emotions. What we can be is in right relationship with our emotions. So, for example, this is actually me when I had long hair. And one of the things what I always had a longing for after I moved to the United States, having lived in Denmark until I was 26 years old, and I moved to the United States. And there was this fruit cake craving that I had on a regular basis. And then one day they built this pastry shop right next to my office. So now I ended up having to walk by this pastry shop that had that exact fruit cake in the window. And I had to walk by several times a day. So now I really had to change my relationship with that trigger, right? And so what I did was I would very often go in and I have this longing for this fruitcake. And I would go in, sit down, have the fruitcake and my cup of tea. And it didn't really feel like it was doing for me what I was expecting it to do. And then I realized it wasn't actually the fruitcake what I wanted. What I wanted was time with my mother, because we always shared fruitcake on Saturday afternoons. And since I was in the US, she was not with me. That was a way for me to bring back my mom. So having that relationship with my emotions around that, I could now just appreciate my mother instead of eating the fruitcake. And that is how memories work with us. And so if we can actually listen more to our emotions, we can start shifting into this place where we have a more nourished relationship with ourselves. I want to see if there were any questions about this.
Yes, Jeanette, we have a few questions actually, and I'll read out a couple of them. And one question is how to be motivated during difficult times. How do I motivate myself in exceptionally difficult times? Do you have a viewpoint on that one?
How to be more, with yourself?
How to be motivated. How do I motivate?
Motivated, yes. That is a very good question, because what happens with motivation and fear is very interconnected. It's the same thing with creativity. If we're living in fear and anxiety, it's very hard to be motivated or creative or innovative. It's the same thing that happens when we're in a stressful situation. Anytime we're under stress and we are in fear or in the not knowing, when we don't know what's going to happen, a lot of times we lose our motivation because we don't know where to go. And so around self-care especially, it's very hard to take care of ourselves when we are in this place of feeling like we don't have control of things. So I think one of the things, the first thing about motivation, we tend to beat ourselves up to be more motivated. And one of the things I think we need to do instead is be more kind. Be more kind and actually have that emotional touch in. One of the things I love to say is, when was the last time you asked yourself, how are you today? We don't do that. We may ask others, but we don't often ask ourselves. And if we ask ourselves, do we actually listen? So one of the things that I'm talking about here on this slide is how we can shift from just having physical health focus to mind-body health focus, which is how we include our emotional well-being. And then we reach a place where we actually have a place where we are in a growth mindset, but also in a place where we take charge. That is where we really feel like we're in charge of our immunity. And so that's part of the motivation as well, right? If we're just feeling like, I just got to take care of my physical health, it might not have enough meaning in times like this. But if we're connecting it to how our emotional needs of feeling safe, feeling that we belong, feeling that we engage with other people, that place comes from a listening to ourselves. That idea that we can start being in a right relationship with our emotions that says, wait a minute, if I listen to my emotions, maybe I have more information about what I need, rather than judging our emotions as not being welcome. There's a very big difference between listening to our emotions and reacting in an emotional way. Because when we are mindful of our emotions, when we ask ourselves, how am I today? What do I need so I can feel a little bit better? We can then move into, from a mindfulness perspective, we can move into that place of, I now know how to act and respond and take care and take charge, and our stress levels go down. And that is how our mental health actually grow. Does that make sense?
It does. And I have another question here for you from our audience, actually, which is basically asking, how can I release myself from being controlling? Because being controlling causes me stress. This is a question for the audience. What's your response to this particular question?
Well, the idea of being controlling again comes from this sense that we think we have to take charge by rejecting our emotions or rejecting how we feel about something. So we need to come from a place of feeling that we are in control of it rather than in mastery of it, right? Let me see here. This next slide helps us do that. So being in control means that we are using willpower. And so that is what I call the old mindset, because that is what we've been told. We've been told that we need to be in control. We've been told that we have to disregard how we feel about something and just take charge and be in, control of what we do and have willpower. Essentially, what it comes down to is love power. It comes down to this shift of our relationship with self that says, I matter. Because of course we do. And a lot of times we have an idea that we come last because we need to take care of other people. And you can argue that that's still true, but you're no good to other people if your relationship with yourself is not healthy. Because the relationship you have with yourself becomes how you interact with other people. If you think about the communication you have with yourself, how do you communicate with yourself? So self-care, when I talk about self-care, I don't talk about the habits. I talk about the relationship we have with ourselves from a self-communication, self-awareness, self-responsibility, and self-expression. That means how we talk to ourselves, our self-talk. Do you say to yourself, way to go, try again? Or are you the inner critic that goes, oh, you're just no good? So can we shift from the inner critic to the inner coach? Self-awareness is that moment where we say, hey, how am I today? What do I need so that I can? Self-responsibility is what you're talking about when you're talking about control. Self-responsibility is different. It's the sense that says, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z. I want to take better care of myself. So instead of saying, I just need to do this, that might not fit you. Instead say, what would help me do that? Because now you're designing it for you rather than fitting into somebody else's belief of how it should look. I used to be a competitive gymnast when I was 6 years old till I was 18, 19 years old. So you can argue that I'm very good at doing that. I have absolutely no intention to be that hard on myself anymore. I'm 57 years old. What I am right now is very gentle with myself. I do yoga, I walk, I stretch. I do things that allow me to listen to my body, not beat myself up more. And I actually think that I am in better shape now than I was in my 30s. Like I should go to the gym every day. So it's this idea of listening rather than controlling. I hope that makes sense. And that's where we come to self-expression. That is where we say, this is what I need so that I can, and ask for what we need, not asking other people to solve it for us, but us being aware of what we need so that we can get into a relationship that says, hey, I need 5 minutes right now to go breathe. Is that okay with you? I'm going to take a break. Or listen, I need to go for a walk. Let me take half an hour and I'll be back, and then I'll be in much better mindset to have this conversation. Or maybe we say, I need a conversation with somebody who I haven't expressed to how I feel about something. And when we talk to other people from a self-care perspective, we talk to them with curiosity, we acknowledge them, we respect them, and we have empathy. And that's how our relationship with other people shifts when we take better care of ourselves. And that is how we can unlock our personal power, but also the human advantage of being able to engage with other people in a kind, loving, compassionate way. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Fabulous. Can I ask another question, actually, from our audience before we move on? And someone is asking, actually, is stress normal? And how to control it if it's originating from our surroundings. So basically, is it normal to have stress? And if it's emanating from your surroundings, what are you supposed to do to control it? Are you supposed to control it?
I get goosebumps when I hear that question because I love that question so much. Because I think that is essentially what stress is about. There's two things about stress. One is the story we're telling ourselves, which is what I mentioned before, right? The story we're telling ourselves about what we're capable of. So stress isn't what we have to do. Stress is what we believe we cannot get done. So stress comes from the belief system that we don't think we can handle something, or that we don't have control, which is the same version of I can't handle it. So it's our relationship with ourselves again that shows up as stress. And yes, it comes from the outside. Pretty much always does, right? Because it's something in our environment that we don't feel we're in control of, or that we have to measure up to. So we cannot change our environment. We cannot change what's happening, but we can change our relationship with it. And the point is, it starts with changing the relationship we have with ourselves. And we come back home to our very own body, see ourselves as the most important tool we have, that our very own body is our most important tool for functioning today. But what often happens under stress is that we let go of our self-care first, when really that is when we should step it up. And we're seeing that now during a global crisis like this, is that we're seeing that we got to step back. We got to step back and say, okay, we got to take care of ourselves. And so that's the importance that I'm hoping will shift right now, is that we really see what is the change that we can create right now. And that change is about slowing down and making a new relationship with ourselves where we can see that we matter. And I'm not talking about an ego sort of like, I matter. I'm talking about a very human, very, very interrelated, interconnected relationship that we have with ourselves, and seeing how that is interconnected with other people. And it's this beautiful, what I call the human advantage, is that we are connected and bonded by the same basic needs. If you're looking at Maslow's hierarchy, we have physical needs, but I was also showing in the image before this one, we have physical needs. We all have those physical needs. We all need the physical, simple self-care. And if we don't do that, we will feel more stress in our lives altogether, because now we're in the survival mode. That in and of itself is a trigger. Our emotional needs, we all have them. They're different for different people, but we all have emotional needs. And the basic core need is to belong, feel emotionally safe, and feel that we can engage with other people. We need that interaction with other people. And we also all have mental needs for growth, where curiosity comes in, where we can get into a relationship with other people that is mentally and intellectually stimulating. That is a need we also all have at different levels and different scales. And so the Maslow hierarchy of needs that are relating to all of us is very important for us to manage stress and recognize that we can't achieve all of these things without taking care of our human needs, our core basic human needs that we all share on this earth. And it comes down to food, water, sleep, rest, pauses. That is the 101 of self-care. It comes down to having human-to-human connection, and also being aware of our emotional needs and be able to share what they are, not in a needy way, but just being able to say, listen, I am feeling scared right now. If we can't say that, if we can't say, I feel scared or I feel a little vulnerable right now, then we get more stressed, because now we feel it's not okay to have that feeling. If we hush our emotions, if we hush our feelings, we're actually creating more stress in our bodies. So I hope that answers that question.
It does. So let's talk about the future then. I mean, what do you think will change in the future in terms of general like health and well-being, and also the importance of immunity in general? What are your views, taking a look into the future?
I hope we can do this more. I don't know if you can see it, but it says to pause. I hope we can pause more. I think that the future really has, if you're looking at the future, we're looking at it as technology is taking over and things are speeding up. Mm-hmm. But what I really think we also need to look at, and I think this is the big shift, the big opportunity we have right now actually, is to create a shift that says, wait a minute, we humans matter. But how do we change our relationship with technology so that we don't have to keep up with technology? And if you think about it, AI is actually trying to keep up with us. AI is not about some other techno whatever idea. AI is about figuring out us as humans in terms of our habits and how we engage and interact. But what it can't figure out is the human-to-human connection that is related with emotions, which is related with empathy, which is coming from that place of respect, of acknowledging each other, the ability to pause and listen before we respond. That, I think and hope, is the future that we are now seeing just exactly shifted in front of our eyes, where we're saying, wait a minute, we have to learn how to take better care of ourselves. We have to be in a different relationship with what it means to be human. And we have that opportunity now, and I think it's important that we bring that with us into the future.
Fabulous. So again, talking about yourself and obviously your plans for the future, I mean, just tell us a bit about your work, really, like any projects on the horizon, new books. I mean, how are you going to spend this downtime? Do you have a downtime, as lots of us are having at the moment? I mean, what's going on right now with yourself and Pathway?
I don't have downtime right now because actually I feel this is the time where I can help the most in the world in general, where I can really spread this message. And I hope you will help me spread the message that having a self-care mindset is really, really important. And that it's no longer just about self-care being this idea that, oh, we can pamper ourselves after a long day, but rather it's about taking care of ourselves throughout the day. So that we don't have to recover, we don't have to burn out, we don't have to be stressed out in that same way. You know, the reason why I came to this work to begin with was because not only did I have two burnouts, but also, as you heard in the introduction, both my parents died of cancer just a year apart. And I was the caretaker for my father while he was dying. And I had many conversations with him, which was actually an amazing opportunity to learn from somebody who's looking back at a life. And what I recognized back then was that what really matters is the love we shared, the moments we shared, what we've learned, and the interactions and the interpersonal relationships. That's really what we take with us. And if we can learn how to integrate that into our workplaces, into our communities, then we have something that's very, very special. And I hope that that is part of the projects I'm doing now. I am actually considering using this time to write a book, but I haven't write another book that I've been wanting to write for a long time. But I'm glad I didn't start it because I just changed the focus of it. So now I can, start anew. And I want to share a tool before we end. I want to share a tool with everyone before we end. Can I share that right now? One of the things that you can do to take charge of your everyday stress, that you can motivate yourself, that you can actually learn how to be in different relationship with yourself, is what I call my AAA. If you, it's probably, I don't know if it's everywhere beyond America, but in America, a AAA is really who you call when your car breaks down. But I want to use it as our human survival tool before we break down. It is to pause, acknowledge, what am I feeling right now? Accept the situation for what it is. That's where stress comes in. I can't change the situation, so I got to accept it for what it is. And then ask yourself, what do I need so that I can feel better, do my best, whatever it is that you need to do within the situation that it is right now based on how you feel. So always think of the AAA. It's a mindfulness tool that I teach people. And it's basically saying, if I can acknowledge how I feel, accept the circumstances for what they are, then I can find a solution for how to take better care of myself by asking myself and my body, my heart, what do I need right now so that I can? That is the best tool I can give you to walk away with.
Fabulous. I have one final question
Yes.
before I let you go, which is a question from the floor, asking about self-relationships, our relationship with ourselves, and how do you, I suppose, reassess it, optimize it? How do you get the best self-relationship with yourself?
Ooh, we should get another session together.
Yeah.
It starts with listening, because a lot of times we have a hard time being honest with ourselves. It's really hard to be honest with ourselves about what's not working. We might beat ourselves up about what we're not doing right, but we have a hard time being honest about what's our own responsibility in that. And so if we can be kind, it's easier to be honest. Same thing when we interact with other people. The more kind we can be, it's easier to have a conversation, isn't it? And all relationships about conversation. So what is the conversation you're having with yourself? Are you curious? So the first way to really start this is by being curious. The curiosity is what's going to carry this through. Can we continue to be curious with ourselves and each other? Can we ask more questions? The idea of continuing to ask questions is how we can peel that onion that comes closer and closer and closer to our heart, our soul, whatever you call it. But this thing inside of us that is always alive and wanting the best for us. And it's this very, very important piece that we have to remember, that we're coming from a place of care, then everything will be okay. If we can come from a place of taking care of ourselves, coming from a place of wanting to care for other people, coming from a place of wanting to care for our environment, if we're coming from a place of care, everything's going to be okay. Remember, care is curiosity, acknowledgement, respect, and empathy when we're engaging with other people. And care for ourselves is self-communication, self-awareness, self-responsibility, and self-expression. So you can ask questions within each of that category and say, how am I communicating with myself? What are the words I'm saying to myself? That's a good place to start because it gives you an idea of what your relationship with yourself is. And listen to those words and say, would I say those words to a friend? And what would I like a friend to say to me instead? That's a good place to start. Start listening, and that comes from pausing. We got to slow down a little bit so we can have the right relationship with what it means to be human.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. Thank you for your insightful session. I have learned a lot. I'm sure our audience has as well. The knowledge you've shared has certainly been very useful. I believe we'll do our best to apply it to our own varied circumstances. We wish you lots of success in your future endeavors. I'm sure you have lots more exciting projects upcoming. Good luck if you choose to write the book, whatever topic you choose to write it on. And I do hope that our paths will cross again.
I hope so too.
Able to even gain more from you in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I hope everybody had a lot of insight, because that's really the point here, is that when we relate it to ourselves, it becomes knowledge and wisdom, not just information. So please go and apply it.
Thank you so much.
Take care.